So thank you all very much for joining today. My name is Imogen Weatherhead and I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Qudini. We've got some really interesting insights into how consumers are behaving around retail banking during the coronavirus outbreak. And this comes from a survey that we ran to 2,000 American consumers on behalf of kind of helping our clients to navigate the COVID-19 landscape and the banking industry in general. So obviously, as we all know, coronavirus has completely changed the world as we know it, and no one knows how long this new way of life will continue for. So to help banks to adapt, we surveyed 2,000 UK consumers on their behaviours. And our survey gave rise to two key findings in terms of how consumers are interacting with bank branches and how they want support from their banks during COVID-19. So the first finding was that customers are mostly avoiding bank branches to a lesser extent than other non-essential stores, but to a much greater extent than the other businesses that have been classed as essential and have been allowed to remain open. So we found that outside of COVID-19, on average, 87% of Americans said that they would normally expect to visit a bank branch or they would engage with a bank branch at some point. But we found that during COVID-19, 52% of Americans are avoiding bank branches as much as possible or even entirely, and 39% are heavily reducing their visits, and only 8% of consumers are visiting them as normal. So if we compare that to some of the other industries, you can see that just here you've got grocery stores where only 14% of people are avoiding them. So people are actually 3 times more likely to avoid a bank branch than they are a grocery store. 30% of people are avoiding pharmacies. So people are almost two times more likely to avoid a bank branch over a pharmacy. And you've got 56% of people avoiding their doctor's clinics, which we thought was interesting to compare at a time of a national or even global health crisis. So just so this survey was also taken in the 2 weeks prior to lockdown starting. So we feel it's reflective of how customers will behave throughout. So we also understood what different types of retail stores they were avoiding. So you can see here, these are all your kind of non-essential retailers that have had to close their stores, with the exception in some countries with DIY and pet stores or some states. And you can see that bank branches are avoided to a slightly lesser extent than others, but still obviously more than these other essential stores. So on average, 82% of people are avoiding these non-essential store types. We then looked at it by age demographic. So we can see here that outside of COVID-19 on the left here, the different demographics that will typically expect to visit a branch. So it's pretty much even for millennial, Gen X and baby boomer at about 89%, 88% of people, whereas Gen Z, only 79% of people expect to visit bank branches. And we don't know if that's because they are less likely generally to engage with bank branches, or if just at this time they don't need to go to bank branches because they're younger and they have less complex financial needs. But during COVID-19, we found that across the board, every demographic, by pretty much half of the people within it, are avoiding bank branches during COVID-19, particularly millennial customers and also Gen Z customers. So it might be that these customers feel more adept with digital banking methods, so they feel more able to avoid branches as a result, because there's definitely a decline for baby boomers, although still very slight. We also found that across men and women, so normally visit is the blue column here, outside of COVID-19, men are very slightly more likely to visit bank branches than women. But during the outbreak, women are also 20% more likely to avoid their bank branch. So in general, it seems that men find bank branches, they're more likely to avoid them, but they also find them harder to avoid. We also looked at it by income bracket as well. So we found that on average, the outside of COVID-19, the blue here, higher income households are more likely to visit bank branches. So there's a very clear correlation there. But during COVID-19, Higher income households are also slightly less likely to avoid bank branches. So you can see here that 12% of people are still visiting bank branches as normal in this highest household income bracket, which is much more than those in the lower income and the others. So that's quite interesting that you've got the higher income households coming more to branch during COVID-19. We also looked at it by industry profession and found that you've obviously got different types of customers that would normally visit branches. So for example, manufacturing and utilities customers, 94% of people will typically visit a bank branch. IT and telecoms, which was interesting, whereas actually interestingly, it's lower in the finance industry. But during COVID-19, you've got lots of different customers of all these different types, avoiding bank branches to different extents as well. And you can kind of probe into this report by downloading it from our website, which I'll share to everyone after the webinar. And then we also looked at it by region as well as by state as well, although state was harder because there were not so many people in some of the categories. But by region, we found that outside of COVID-19, you've got customers in the Northeast are much more likely to visit a bank branch than customers, say, in the Southwest. But during COVID-19, they're pretty much evenly likely to avoid their bank branches as a result of the coronavirus outbreak. And that's something we found common in all of the trends, actually, where there's groups where their interest in bank branches outside of COVID-19 might vary, but during COVID-19, they generally seem to be evenly spread in terms of how much they'll avoid a bank branch. So what we feel this shows for banking in the COVID-19 era is that in-branch social distancing and enhanced customer management will be really, really important to building customer confidence to visit branches. Like currently footfall in most branches, including our clients, is lower than they would expect. So how can we make it really easy for customers to know what's happening and to be able to come into branch and feel confident to come back? And if banks can get this right, it can mean that customers can stay safe, but they can also continue to sell and to build long-lasting relationships with their customers. And so we're seeing some banks who are turning to virtual queuing or ways for customers to check into branch, check the wait times and the service options outside of branch before making an entry into branch, or even enabling them to book a time just to visit branch or to actually receive in-person service when they get to branch. So some of the ways that we've been helping some banks is enabling customers who want to come into branch to check in with a host, or they can scan a QR code or access a web link from the website of the bank to just check the details of the wait times or service options outside or with the branch host. If there's a wait, they kind of get added to a virtual queue or virtual wait line, and they can then get a text message with their position, with their wait time, and it means the branch team can manage the customers and just guide them through their experience. You can even have TV screens that enable customers to see their wait time from a distance. So lots of different features to pick and mix. We're also seeing banks who are managing their capacity online and then displaying how many customers can come into branch and making everyone book a fixed time to come into branch. And that could be from their website or that could be from the host as well. And then the customers get emails and texts. And it's really, really easy to manage customers in any device. They can even check in from their phone when they get there. And in addition, actually enabling customers to, if they don't want to come into branch, to be able to book virtual service by phone or video, which relates to the second key finding of our survey, which was that customers want virtual service by phone or video from their banks during COVID-19, but we also expect that this goes outside of COVID-19 as well. So we found that 63% of banking customers want some kind of virtual phone or video service. 55% were interested by phone and 17% by video. So you can see here, actually, customers are equally likely to want virtual service by video as they are from pharmacy and grocery, but they're much more likely, or almost as likely as pharmacy, to want virtual service by phone, and they're as likely to want virtual service by phone as they are from their doctor's clinics. which was interesting. And if we compare that to all of the non-essential retailers, we actually found that across the board, so at the top here, customers are more likely to want virtual service by phone or video from the essential retailers and banks, despite the fact that their stores and branches are open. So you can see it's much, much higher here at the top for your banks and grocery stores and your pharmacies compared to all of these other retail categories who mostly have their stores closed. So people, despite these stores being open or branches being open, people are avoiding them, and they do want to engage virtually if they can. So we then looked at this by age demographic. So we found that Gen Z millennial customers here on the left are more likely to want virtual service by phone than Gen X and baby boomers, only slightly, but they're twice as likely than baby boomers to want virtual service by video. And they're also slightly more likely to want virtual service by Gen X customers. And this is why we believe this interest in virtual service could extend beyond coronavirus, because it's something that younger demographics seem more interested in, even by phone, which we didn't actually expect, but definitely by video. So we also looked at it, so we found that overall across all the retailers, that all types of stores and bank branches that we studied, customers in the Gen X, Millennial and Gen Z categories are twice as likely to want virtual service by video than baby boomers. So here you've got baby boomers are 11% of people want virtual service by video in the baby boomer category, and 19% in the younger generations. And then you can see actually that these older kind of baby boomer generations are much more likely though to want virtual service from banks than they are from other types of retail stores, including even pharmacies, which is interesting, including, for example, DIY. It's on par with mum, children and toy, but it's definitely much higher than things like makeup and skincare, pet stores, electronics retailers. So there is a high interest in virtual service by video from baby boomers compared to other categories, but it's also definitely much higher for younger generations. We found that women are slightly more likely to want virtual service by phone. So that's men in the blue on the left here, women in the pink here. But we found that men are slightly more likely to want virtual service by video than women, so 47% more likely. So that's actually slightly higher than women's greater interest in virtual service by phone. And we also found that the Gen Z customers are the demographic least likely to visit bank branches outside of COVID-19, but they are the most likely to want virtual service. So here you can see the demographics that said they would normally visit bank branches and their interest in virtual service by phone. So even though Gen Z customers are less likely to visit a branch, they are much more likely to want virtual service by phone or video. So that does start to show like a trend towards virtual service over visiting branches within the younger generations. And we also believe that as a result, because you've got even baby boomers wanting to engage virtually, this might lead to a migration of even the older generations engaging more with banks online and potentially reducing their branch visits in the future as COVID-19 subsides. So we also found that, so these are in the red here, the customers who are avoiding bank branches and from each demographic, and their interest in virtual service by phone or video. So we found that the younger generations are most interested in virtual service, and they're also most likely to avoid branches. Whereas again, you've got baby boomers are finding it harder to avoid branches, and they're also less interested in virtual service. So there's definitely still some interest in bank branches that is higher amongst that category. And again, similarly for men and women, we found that women are more likely to avoid bank branches, but they're less likely to want virtual service by phone or video, whereas men are more likely. So there could be a conversion of men to virtual service by phone or video that would then lead in the future to greater conversion of women as well. And then the final one is virtual service by phone or video for household income. So we can see that there is a strong correlation between, so basically the highest and the lowest income brackets were the most likely to want virtual service by video. So that's the blue here at the top. So 21% of the higher household income brackets want virtual service by video, and 19% of the lower. And then you've got about 16% here. So it could show that particularly at this time, people in these categories might feel that they have more complex financial needs, particularly obviously with the economic downturns that are happening at this time. We found that, interestingly, these two middle brackets are much more likely to want virtual service by phone than the other categories. So where they are less likely to want virtual service by video, it kind of balances that out because they have a higher interest in virtual service by phone. We also looked at it by industry profession, which you can see more of if you download our report. And we also looked at it by state as well. So we found that customers in the Northeast are much more likely to want virtual service by video. And they're also but they're equally likely to want virtual service by phone. Whereas customers in the Southeast were the least likely to want virtual service by video. So as a result, we've seen a lot of banks who are taking their virtual services or who are taking their kind of personalized services online during COVID-19 by enabling customers to book appointments with them. We've even been helping one bank here in the UK to take their events online, particularly to help educate and engage some of the customers who might not know how to use digital banking methods. So they're holding a series of webinars on banking, how to use online banking, how to use mobile banking to help migrate customers to the new channels that they need to use during COVID-19. So just to recap on our two key findings, so 52% of customers are avoiding bank branches during COVID-19, and on average 56% of people want some kind of virtual service by phone or video. So what we feel this shows for retail banking in the COVID-19 era is that in-branch social distancing is absolutely essential to building customer confidence to visit, and that largely customer relationships should be built online, or banks should at least have some kind of option to receive service or engage with the brand and build a relationship with the brand online, because people are avoiding branches or kind of coming in and out of them as quickly as possible. And banks who excel in this area will be able to improve their sales and also increase a competitive advantage. They'll also be able to increase loyalty and customer relationships with online service as well. So thank you so much for watching. We're Qudini. We power leading global brands and banks with appointment scheduling software, queue management software, event booking software, and task management software. If I can provide any more insights on this survey or on what we do, please feel free to get in touch. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. The turnout has been outstanding. So really looking forward to sharing some more events with everyone in the future.